Good evening. The October 16th, 2025 meeting of the Corvallis School Board is now called to order at 6:33 p.m. To support the health and safety of all community members, particularly those who are immunocompromised and their families, the board continues to offer a virtual participation option for board members and district staff. Public comment is available at select meetings, both in person and virtually. Details on how to provide public comment are available on the Corvallis School District website. Tonight's agenda, board packet, and a link to the district's YouTube channel can be found on the school board page of the website. All public meetings are live streamed on YouTube, and recordings are typically posted the following day. Tonight we have Sammy, Judah, Chris, Shauna, Therese, Bernie, and myself in attendance in person. And the first item on the agenda is acknowledgement of Indigenous Peoples Day. And I did want to say we realized that it is past Indigenous Peoples Day, which was on Monday, but we still wanted to make sure to read it all for you all. And I know that it went out to the district before this meeting. So,
Acknowledgement of Indigenous Peoples Day. Whereas Christopher Columbus, a man who is inaccurately described as having discovered the Americas, came upon land that was already inhabited by indigenous peoples, and
whereas Columbus's voyage to the Americas led to the introduction of transatlantic slavery, land disposition, and genocidal acts against indigenous peoples, and whereas the city of Corvallis and current-day Benton County are on lands fully inhabited by the Kalapuya people before removal for settlers, and
whereas education is a necessary component for creating a more equitable and anti-racist community, nation, and world, and whereas the Corvallis School District has made a commitment to equity and anti-racism, and
whereas the Corvallis School District has an opportunity to uniquely reach and educate children as a touchstone in the community, and whereas the Corvallis School District has a responsibility to honor and respect the diverse histories of our community, and
whereas the Corvallis School District recognizes and acknowledges the significant contributions made in our community by Indigenous people and commits to ensure greater understanding of these contributions by all students through Oregon SB 13 curriculum, and
whereas the idea of Indigenous Peoples Day was first proposed in 1977 by a delegation of Native nations to the United Nations, and
whereas the state of Oregon does not formally recognize Columbus Day, and whereas the city of Corvallis has proclaimed the second day of October as Indigenous Peoples Day in Corvallis since 2015, and
whereas the state of Oregon has proclaimed the second day of October as Indigenous Peoples Day in Oregon since 2017, whereas this day should be recognized for the indigenous peoples of the Americas.
Therefore, let it be resolved by the Board of Education of the Corvallis School District do hereby proclaim Monday, October 12, 2020, as well as the second Monday of October annually as Indigenous Peoples Day in the district, and strongly encourage families, staff, and community members to join in existing local Indigenous Peoples Day celebrations, and encourage all schools in the district to help highlight this day in grade-appropriate ways, as well as highlight the contributions of Indigenous peoples to the local community, nation, and beyond, both historically and in current times. Adopted this day, October 8, 2020.
thanks everyone. And I just wanted to briefly also say that it's the 10-year anniversary of Indigenous Peoples Day in the state of Oregon, which started here in Corvallis alongside Portland, Oregon in 2015. So I just wanted to point that out really quickly too. Okay, the next item on the agenda is board member reports. Does anybody have a report? Shauna? And then Chris?
So there's been a lot happening across the district in so many different ways. A couple of things that I know I've been able to be a part of, as well as other board members too, are listening sessions related to consolidation planning. And so it's been really a pleasure and felt very important to have those opportunities to be able to sit with community, to listen to community, to hear from family members, staff, students, and others. So thank you for those of you who are able to engage in those ways. We know we've been trying to collect feedback in multiple ways. That was one of the ways, but really appreciated having that opportunity to be at several of the listening sessions. I've also had a chance to be part of some of the innovation team meetings that have happened, which I know we'll talk more about maybe later during the consolidation discussion, so I won't get too far into that. But it's been really inspiring to see educators coming together and really think about what does meaningful education look like in Corvallis? What could the profile of a graduate that really resonates with the community, with students, with community partners and families look like? So there's a lot of really critical work happening there with voices of educators and then carrying that out into the community, I know in different ways that will be coming, that I feel very just honored and grateful to be a part of. And then finally had a chance last night to be part of the district's equity committee meeting, where some of those conversations from the innovation team were brought to community partners and families who participate in that meeting as well, in terms of thinking about what are the skills, knowledge bases that are important for Corvallis graduates. So very grateful for staff, for community members, for families and community partners who have been coming and engaging in these different ways.
I too have much appreciation about bringing listening sessions together and just being able to have time to sit and listen to people. And I really appreciate all the district people that put all the effort into making those happen. Kelly especially, just all the communication and all of that was appreciated. I also was able to attend the Osborne update meeting, and I also wanted to give a shout out to Kim Patton for doing a great job explaining that whole process and just really making it easy for those of us who know very little about construction to help us understand what really is going on there at the pool and working along with the city. So I appreciate that. And it was, I think, we had a lot of people that were very appreciative of having that information. I also just wanted to give a shout out to the different schools and staff who have been doing open houses, inviting the parents to come in and look at their children's classrooms in the schools, and just, I know people felt very welcomed, and I know that takes a lot of work and effort for teachers and staff to put those together, and I just really appreciate that we're doing that. And then I too also was able to attend Delta and DDI last night, DEDI. And I just wanted to shout out to Marcianne and Angel Harris for putting together a great evening of just really good information and connecting with people. I told her last night that meeting itself just fills my bucket. I just get to really feel just that connection with some of our families is really positive.
Any other board members with a report? Sammy?
I'll just highlight briefly that I attended the listening session. I was grateful to have the opportunity to attend each one of them. One of them, they ranged from one community member up to, I believe, around 50 or more. In the case of one community member that was translated, there was probably 3 board members in addition to myself, so I excuse myself from that one, and I trust it was really great to see the intentionality of staff, intentionality of our board members being there and being available in every language in as many neighborhoods as possible and different times, and I have seen the diversity of community members showing up to those topics. Also, the Osborne program, I want to really give credit to Kim and the school district team. I know you will hear a lot that it is partnership between the city and the school district. I want to also highlight that the school district is going above and beyond to strengthen that partnership and focus on delivering value for our community members to be able to go back to using the swimming pool. Also, I want to highlight, I did not get to yet, but I want to share my appreciation to the music program for inviting us for a multitude of programs, including, I believe yesterday there was the marching bands, and in a couple of weeks an orchestra. So I just want to say thank you for the invitations, and I'll do my best to attend as many of them.
Any other board member reports? Okay, I had a couple things too. The Osborne meeting, and that's already been discussed. So I would just say that I also attended that, and it was really nice to walk around and talk with people and hear the updates as well. I was able to go to all but one listening session, but the one I couldn't go to was because of a work conflict. And as it's already been stated, I really appreciated being able to hear directly from community members and families, and we get the reports, and it means a lot to hear from people's individual voices as well in those spaces. And then the innovation team meetings that Shauna also mentioned, that's been really great to hear how those are going and be part of those conversations. And then I wasn't able to go to the DEDI and Delta meeting because of a work conflict as well for evening programming this month is a lot, but and then also the student rep orientation that we had last time. So that was nice to be able to see everybody there too. And so that's my report for that part. And then the next thing on the agenda is the OSBA and NSBA. OSBA is the Oregon School Board Association, and National School Board Association updates. I can just keep going, I guess, since it's the Oregon one, and then Sammy can do the national one. We had a retreat last month and for the OSBA board, and learned about all the policy updates, approved a lot of those that are happening at the state level to guide the work of OSBA, which impacts our local board work, especially through their policy developments and trainings. And they sent out guidance on understanding the federal budget cuts on local districts, and so that was really great information to be able to share with our board and other folk in the region. We also have a fall regional meeting next week for our region, the Lynn Benton Lincoln one. So if you all have not signed up for that, if any are available, I would encourage you to attend that. And we also have annual convention next month. And we have a couple of presentations with Kim and Byron, with Byron and Kim at that event as well. So I'm looking forward to those. And yeah, so that's everything that's going on with OSBA. There's a lot of details, and if folk ever have questions about that, I'm happy to share that from the community. So go ahead, Sammy.
Thank you, Chair. So as a reminder, I want to thank our Chair, Lahui White Bear, for her representation on both as the president of the Color Caucus and representative for the Lynn Benton Lincoln region. I'll add one more thing. I would like to encourage my colleagues or any community members with neighbors from other districts in Lynn Benton Lincoln to encourage their boards to vote for our representative on behalf of Lynn Benton Lincoln region to retain her seat on Oregon School Board Association. Those updates and the value Lahui has brought to our board, to the region, and to Oregon has been phenomenal. We nominated her, and every board will be voting who's going to be representing the region. So I would encourage my colleagues to reach out to our colleagues across Oregon. On the national level, I came back from Salt Lake City from a regional meeting for Pacific States region, and we met with leaders from 5 states. As a reminder, thank you for your trust to represent Corvallis and Oregon and 5 states on the national board. That has been funded by the national board, so taxpayers did not directly contribute to any of this travel. However, I was able to learn a lot of lessons learned that I would like to share back. I will share them in a written report, but as a highlight, I'll share a few things. The first one that I'll be moving from the table from both sides, there's a best practice handbook for student achievement in public education from the Office of the Legislative Auditor General and Utah legislator, and any community members who would like to see this report. It's accessible publicly online from the Auditor General websites and Utah legislator. The interesting thing that they had an auditor who would come to the school district, similar to the accountability bill sentiments that we have, and will do an evaluation. So during the presentation, I pulled up Oregon School Board Association, OSBA's self-evaluation 13 standards, and I was able to match the overlap that they have. I believe they can learn some stuff from us, but also there are some layers that I feel we could learn from them as well. They don't only interview boards, but also they interview district office, and also they interview at the school level and provide feedback, and they have best practices that they can measure and provide positive feedback for school districts, school boards, and schools. So I would like to just share this with you, and I'll be sharing it with OSBA as well. And I have 3 copies if you would like to borrow a hard copy. Another update from the visit is an AI framework in education training. It was really in-depth training, the best training I ever had so far. I believe from either Utah or Nevada, and I have the contact information for the person who shared some best practices about tools, privacy laws, consortium purchasing agreements where school districts can have an agreement of tools that has been vetted to actually support educators and maintain the privacy laws that we need to observe. And that will provide better value for school districts. So there are a multitude of feedback I received. The last thing I want to share, and this is like a little bit last minute, tomorrow I'll be joining the first legislative committee on the National School Board Association. And the legislative committee will discuss a few things. One of them reviewing the legislative priorities for the committee. As you may know, NSBA is uplifting the full funding of IDEA, full funding for special education, uplifting title funding, protecting title funds, including other priorities. So I would like to invite you, if you have any feedback, maybe during the comments period or right now, or anytime between today and tomorrow morning, happy to forward those on the national level. Also, we have a legislative government relations manager who has been retained to really help us advocate with members of Congress, each one of them from both parties and in the Senate, to support and protect education during these challenging times. So that will be the charge of the committee, and I'm honored to be one of 5 members from the NSBA board to represent the committee.
Thanks, Sammy. And just as a reminder, the national and state work does benefit our local districts and being involved in those areas, because we're able to bring that information back here and see what's coming that's impacting our districts, and also understand the policies that are being passed nationally and at the state that impact our local districts. So that's why we have the reports, since there's some of us that are representing that. But next on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
I'm going to keep it really short tonight, just because we have quite a bit of discussion that needs to happen. So just a couple of things to highlight. The first one is that this is National School Lunch Week, and I know several of you are going to join me tomorrow at Lincoln for lunch. So it's an opportunity to have school lunch, and as a reminder to our community, lunches are made available free of charge to all of our students, which is a fantastic thing that happens here in Corvallis. Next, our Osborne Aquatic Survey is closing tomorrow. So if people have not had a chance to fill that out, to give us input into the priority areas and where to go in terms of next steps, we'd appreciate you all doing that. And then finally, again, next Thursday is the fall regional for OSBA at the ESD. So if you're able to make that, I'm sure that they will be talking about the federal landscape, the funding challenges that we are facing, and how we're moving into the short session. So I hope many of you can make it. It's at the ESD next week. So that is my report.
Thanks, Ryan. The next item on the agenda is public comment. We will now open the public comment period. We value the lived experiences of students, families, staff, and the community, and welcome public comment as an essential part of the district and board's work. The complete guidelines for public comment are available at the registration table outside the boardroom entrance and on the board's website. I will now share some important points. When it is your turn to speak, please come forward and take a seat and direct your comments to the board. And make sure this light's red on your microphone too. Speakers may offer objective criticism of district operations and programs, but the board will not hear complaints concerning individual district personnel. As a reminder, you will have 3 minutes to make your comments. The light will be green when your time starts. On the front table right here, it turns yellow when you have 30 seconds, and it turns red when your time is up, at which time I will need to ask you to stop talking. Following your comments, the board will have 3 minutes to ask clarifying questions, but are not able to engage in conversation. If board members would like to revisit a topic or issue brought up during public comment, they may do so at the appropriate time in the agenda. And again, some folk have heard me say this before, but that's a really hard part, because we would love to be able to engage in conversation, but we cannot have back and forth conversations during public comment periods. And before you start your comments, please state your name for the record and state whether you reside within the school district boundary. And Kim will start calling folk up. Oh, we have an online one first, right? No? Okay. Oh, okay.
Hello, my name is Erica Wood, Crescent Valley class of 2021, and I reside within the district boundaries. I want to start by stating that I oppose closing Shuttleland and converting Mountain View to a K-8 for many of the reasons presented by others at the previous listening sessions and school board meetings. I favor a plan which closes 2 elementary schools instead. Today, rather than restate the excellent points of other community members, I want to complicate the pervasive narrative that I have heard at these previous sessions regarding adding 6th grade to elementary schools. This narrative assumes that that adding 6th grade to elementary schools has either a positive or neutral impact on kids who get to remain in close-knit classes longer. I'd like you to consider the experiences of neurodivergent students. First, I want to tell you about my autistic friend's experience in the district. She gave me permission to use her story today. Throughout elementary school, she was in remedial math classes and struggled to catch up to grade level. In 6th grade, she discovered her love of art through the exploratory elective program. Having a dedicated art class gave her something to love about school and a subset of the day to look forward to every day. She became more interested in school overall and began catching up to grade level math. Last June, she graduated with a bachelor's degree in mathematics, and she credits her middle school art elective for inspiring her interest in math. Next, I want to tell you my own experience. Rather than feeling nurtured in the elementary school environment, I struggled to connect with other people. In 6th grade, having distinct classrooms and schedule blocks for each subject gave me a foundation on which I was able to finally form friendships. The consistent schedule from week to week, down to the minute, offered more stability than I ever felt in elementary school and created an environment in which I thrived. Additionally, the responsibility of maintaining that schedule was empowering. 6th grade helped me find the confidence to try new activities, cultivating passions that I still have. Rather than feeling lost in the mysterious social dynamics of elementary school, having 6th grade at Shuttleland enabled me to flourish, setting me up for success in high school and beyond. While these stories are not representative of the entire student population, or even the entire neurodivergent student population, I hope this prompts you to consider how your decisions impact all students, not just those reflected in aggregate data.
Thank you. Is there any questions from the board? Sammy?
Thank you, Erica, for the input. So your proposal is closing 2 elementary schools, and if I understand it correctly, the rationale is in order to retain the K-5 system, to retain the value of 6th grade being in a middle school. My question, if I understand that correctly, my question for you, if closing 2 elementary schools feasibility is challenged by capacity, if we don't have the capacity for it, could you uplift what is it in the 6th grade experience in the middle school, in addition to what you said, that could be retained in a K-6 system, if we would go there?
I think it would be difficult to maintain that in a K through 6 model, but one thing I would recommend is allowing students more ownership over their schedule by presenting it to them at the beginning of the year and it being consistent every day. That's something that is really helpful in the middle school model, whereas in elementary school, I remember that the schedule was like put up on the board at the beginning of the day and you didn't know before you got to school what it was going to look like, and that was really chaotic then getting there.
Thank you very much, Erica.
Any other question? Judah?
Jumping off that last answer, would it have been helpful for you in K through 5 to know your schedule for the next day, the day before?
Yes, definitely. Preferably a whole week before if possible. That way you can prepare over the weekend.
Any other questions? Thank you, Erica. Shun, are you there? Shun, can you hear us?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Just a second, Shun, we had some feedback.
Yep. Can you hear me now?
You guys all turn your mics.
I'm unmuted. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Oh, let's see. Sorry. Let me get my things. Yeah, the online broadcast is extreme brokenness, so I had a hard time following and realized it was my turn. Okay. So yeah, my name is Shinsuke Yamamoto. I'm a community member and father of 2 children in the Corvallis School District, one in Franklin and another in Sheldon. I'm deeply concerned that the bulk of the decision making regarding the school consolidation is already set, and we're all just checking boxes off to pretend like proper input's being received while the process is running through. The listening sessions felt productive, but from it we got an updated FAQ telling us our ideas are incompatible with the district plan, and a stoplight report telling them basically the same. Comments on those yellow items sure make it sound like they have no chance of implementation. Meanwhile, in the current plan, we still see major issues hand wave for later. What are the silver linings of the school consolidation? No, I don't know. Come back later when the innovation team figures something else out. What are we doing about the CV that CV has essentially been marked for death? Oh, I don't know. We'll think about it in 3 years. If we call another emergency, we can close in that year anyways. We'll throw that in page 23 of the FAQ. If this was an intern coming up with these ideas, I'd commend the first effort and tell them to come back when their ideas are more fleshed out and loose ends tied up. But you're telling me this was made by leadership that we trust to be looking ahead and making our 5-10 years plans. If we're looking for unserious ideas, I got one too. Hey, if they're not going to do the job, we can lay off district leadership. Save us to $2 million a year. That'll help balance the budget for the next 3 years. What? That's stupid. Yeah, I agree. Let's all do our jobs then. I hope we can be working together as a community and not be treated as a check mark on the list of due diligence to go through. Thank you.
Thank you, Shun. Does anybody have any questions from the board? Thank you, Shun. There's no questions.
All right. Thank you.
Hi. Sorry. I'm Kira Mudd. I don't reside in the district, but I've worked in the district for 10 years, and I have 2 aviators at Bessie Coleman. I'm here tonight to invite you all to my classroom. When I started 16 years ago, I realized really quickly that the people who are making decisions about the classrooms haven't really spent time in the classroom, And that's not a jab or a negative comment in any way, just an observation. But because of that, I'd love for you to come in and spend the day with me and my students. I've seen a couple of you in the hallways, but it's usually just those quick pop-ins and only passing by like very quickly. I don't know if you've ever been able to spend real time with staff and students, and I want to make sure you know that anytime you're welcome to come in and have that experience with me. And real quick, I want to shout out Chris Hawkins. You were working at Bessie Coleman the other day, and my kindergartner was having a very hard morning, and you were so kind and gentle with us. And seeing you on the ground with the staff like that, just so much respect for that, and I really appreciate it. Things are tense right now in the district, and it can be kind of hard to see through negatives and deficits sometimes. I don't want you to come in to see those. I don't want you to come in for the negatives. I want you to come in and experience the joy. And just kind of like experience what we're fighting for. I want you to get to experience firsthand the amazing things that our kids are doing. And I want you to get to see how crucial the teachers are in supporting and validating and seeing our students for who they really are. We get to hang out with these cool humans all day. They constantly challenge our perspectives, our biases. We're the ones who really know our students. We know their strengths. We know their needs, and we're the experts. We want the best for them because they deserve the best that we can give them. The only way staff is going to be able to do that, though, is if we're at our best. Right now, the current consolidation plan will create more cuts to FTE. And teachers are already worrying about not having a job or about having an involuntary transfer, and we're not even in November yet. Just imagining being a teacher right now and trying to stay in the present with your students while we have this looming over us in the future. To close, I'd like to reference the great Cassie Owen. We know why teachers are leaving the profession. Like, we know how hard it is. Nobody is really asking those of us who are still in it why we're staying. And I would love for you to come and join me so I can show you my answer to that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Kira. Does anybody have any questions? Chris?
Thank you. Thank you for being here and for the shout out. Where do you work and how do we arrange to come visit your classroom?
I work at Crescent Valley, and I'm part-time on odd days, so Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. Shoot me an email, and I can figure all that stuff out.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to frame this in the form of a question. What is the best way for teachers to know that board members need to be specifically invited to visit classrooms?
I don't know.
Okay.
But just kind of like thinking about like, what do I want to say tonight? Like when I see you all in the hallways, it's just, I don't know, it's just really great. And there's always so much more. And I'm always wishing like, oh, I wish they could have stayed around to see this. Or like, I really would have loved to show them this. And those quick pop-ins, you know, like there's just, it's not enough to really get to show like what my kids are doing. And then like, because I don't see you all, I'm wondering like, has anyone invited you in? And what does that process actually look like? So I figured like I would just start that conversation.
Thank you. And then my follow-up question is, can you email us the board at corvallis.k12.or.us email to ask us to attend your classes?
Oh, totally.
With dates and times? That would be very helpful. Would you be able to do that?
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Kira. It's the one that looks like a little person, the button in there. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Chris Cavagnaro. I don't live within the district. I currently work at Mountain View Elementary, working within the SEG program, so also known as the Social Emotional Growth Program. I've had minimal interactions with district office staff over my 6 years here. That was true during my 5 years as a mental health skills trainer, and it continues to be true at the beginning of my second year in the SEG program. Those few and far between interactions have made me feel concerned and upset with the lack of in-person connection, empathy, and understanding the needs of students and staff, especially at the SEG program. The most shocking thing to me has been the lack of apparent awareness at the district level about physical injury that myself and my coworkers have sustained. When you consider the level of trauma the students in our program have experienced, it should come as no surprise their level of emotional and physical intensity when boundaries surrounding safety are set. In my view, the district is not fully committed to the physical nor emotional safety of its students and staff, and the district has been okay with mediocre results in the SEG as it pertains to students developing healthy coping strategies. It is unbelievably hard work to be involved in a physical altercation, sometimes spending up to 30 minutes in a break space using blocking pads to protect ourselves. Blood, sweat, and tears are frequently part of this experience in the break space, sometimes leading to injuries that put us out of work for extended periods of time. K5-sized students can cause you to take a trip to the urgent care. I'm not talking about minor abrasions. I'm talking about concussions and deep wounds. On top of that, we have to return to work and continue to support students who have caused us physical and emotional harm. If you have never done that kind of work, you have never done that kind of work. We may hear students tell us that they want to kill us and our families while we are blocking them in the break space. This job is not for everyone, and it shouldn't be. However, skilled staff who show up time and time again to support students in the SEG to develop healthier ways of expressing anger or frustration should be heard and supported more than what is currently happening. When people at the administrative level here at the district have spoken about the program and provided updates, that viewpoint by the few only tells part of the story.
Chris, your time is up. I'm going to have to ask you to pause for a second.
Okay.
Sammy?
Could you conclude your remarks if you have additional remarks?
I've got maybe a minute more.
Perfect.
Yeah. For all the value this district supposedly puts into the importance of considering multiple perspectives, this perspective taking has not been done with the staff who spend the most time directly working with students in the SEG. There have been district concerns about too many physical holds and transports. My response? Hire more highly trained mental health staff, which would include bringing back skills trainers and hiring more and more therapists to help reimagine this program. Who evaluates the student-to-staff ratios in the alternative education programs such as the SEG and Bridges? How are these ratios created? In summary, where is the commitment to safety and well-being for students and staff at the highest, most intense levels of physical incidents at the elementary level? Who is going to show up, respect what we bring to the table, and work alongside us to make this program safer and more successful for everyone? The SEG team and the students in our program deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Thank you, Chris.
Was already on. Hi, I'm Stephen Hoke, and I reside in the boundary of Corvallis School District. So I have two children, one at CV and then another at Sheldon. When we talk about capital, most of us think about money, budgets, costs, and savings, but in education, we know that capital means something much deeper. It's not about what we spend on our kids, it's about what we build in them. Human capital is the knowledge, creativity, confidence, and resilience that students develop over time. It's what they gain through experiences like sports, music, art, clubs, and the everyday interactions that help them see where they fit into the world. Together, those things form pathways to identity and self-efficacy, that powerful belief in themselves that says, I can do this, I belong here. When we talk about consolidating schools, it's easy to focus on logistics, buildings, numbers, transportation routes, but what we're talking about is disrupting the very process that builds human and cultural capital in our kids. Consolidation often means fewer opportunities for students to participate, explore, and connect. When the number of programs, teams, or performance spaces narrows, so does access. Students who might have joined a team, auditioned for a role, or taken an art class can lose that chance. And those moments, those small opportunities to try, fail, and try again are what help kids form their sense of identity and capability. That loss doesn't always show up in data right away. It shows up in many quieter ways. It's in the student who stops trying out, the one who feels unseen, the one who decides they don't quite belong. And over time, that erodes the very thing we are meant to build in our schools: confident, connected young people who see themselves as capable and valued. Human capital isn't about academics. It's about relationships, it's participation, it's belonging, the conditions that make learning meaningful. And when those conditions weaken, our whole community loses some of its collective strength. So before moving forward with consolidation, I hope that you all pause and ask, are we truly saving resources, or are we spending down the most valuable capital our community has, our students' sense of identity, purpose, and possibility? Because once those pathways close, they're so very hard to rebuild. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions from the board? Thank you, Stephen. Oh, sorry, Sammy, go ahead.
Thank you, Stephen. Really appreciate it. Appreciate seeing you at the listening session as well. One of the things we heard from the priorities is that there were a set of goals, including the school board goals, equity, fiscal aspect in order to protect the programs that we want to protect, and saving the neighborhood schools for the value they bring. Is there another priority that you think we should uplift that could be measurable, that can meet the promise that you want us to uphold, which is protecting the human capital, preserving and focusing on relationships, participation, and belonging? Is there anything missing from those priorities, or you want to uplift a priority within them that will inform what you ask for?
So we hear a lot about community schools, and a lot of times, particularly in the conversations we've had, from these listening sessions from the board, community schools are referred to as like our elementary schools. But our middle school, Sheldon, is a community school. Crescent Valley is a community school. And I think that's getting lost in the conversation. So as far as things that I want to uplift the value of all of the Corvallis community, not just a portion of the community.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Stephen. Okay, hearing no further comments, the public comment period is now closed. Thank you, everybody, for bringing your voices in for this, for the public comment period. Before we get started on the consolidation work time and discussion, since it is a larger block of time, we're going to go ahead and take a short break at this time, and then we'll reconvene. Okay, welcome back, everyone. The next item on the agenda is the consolidation, work time, and discussion. So I'm going to turn it over.
All right, so I'm going to give a little bit of information for you as we move into this topic. So on September 11th, I brought forward an initial proposal, again, an initial proposal for your feedback and community feedback. Since that time, in your packet, we've included the frequently asked questions document that we can continue to add to. The information in those questions have come through primarily through the listening sessions, where one of the questions is about questions that folks have. Also, individuals did QR codes, so they answered it by themselves. Sometimes they did it at a table group. And so we've taken that as best we can into the FAQ. We've done the same as we've received questions from the community, and we have continued to update that weekly. Also, as I mentioned, we've had 4 listening sessions. Out of those listening sessions, we asked a third party to take all of the information, both shared through the QR code, through the listening sessions, and also through all of the emails that the board received, and put that together into a document for you, so you have that tonight. They broke down the 4 questions into themes and sub-themes and individual quotes related to each of the 4 questions that we asked the community. Also, in your packet, you had information based on the information requested by Sammy around some pieces around capacity. And so at this point, really where we're at is we're looking for information from you as I serve as an advisor to the board. I'm looking for direction regarding next steps. In our timeline, we had planned to have a first read and a second read at the upcoming school board meetings. But at the same time, if there's additional information that you're wanting, additional proposals you want to pursue, other ideas you have, this would be helpful to me after the meeting tonight or by the conclusion of the meeting tonight, so we can continue to move forward and get that information to you as you work to make a decision. One of the things that I want to state, just how this process has gone, I think it's important tonight that we establish the opportunity for discussion in such a way that individuals are able to ask questions, either, and even if that's not from their vantage point a pro or a con, to be able to ask the question in order to have the discussion. So creating a safe space for that conversation to happen. I know this is a topic that has a lot of emotion behind it for community members, and I also know that as you've been serving and listening, you've been thoughtful, and I want you to be able to continue to do that. So I'm going to answer the questions the best I can, and at the same time want to make sure that we create space for you to ask those questions and have that discussion, because I think that's valuable and important. And again, by the end of the meeting, I'd like to have next steps for our team. If you have those for us, that would be valuable to know. So what I've done is I've put together a list of 5 questions that I think would help us in this conversation moving forward. So what are our long-term goals for student learning, equity, and community engagement? How does our current proposal support or hinder those goals? What values and priorities have we heard from stakeholders so far? How do we define success once consolidation occurs? And then finally, the one that I've mentioned or alluded to a couple of times, what direction or next steps do you have for me as the advisor to the board? So what I was hoping to do is work our way through those questions. I also want to make sure that, because this is a work session, if those questions don't align with the questions that you have, I want to make sure that there's space for that as well. So I'm open to modifications if need be, but I did think it was important to touch on some of those key aspects to any proposal that comes forward.
Thanks, Ryan.
So how does that sound to the board?
Sound good?
Okay, so before we get started, I do want to make one point, actually 2 points that I think are important in terms of the documentation that you have. The first one is related to the stoplight report. And in that, we marked red to the consolidation or closure of 2 elementary schools. When our thinking around that was is nuanced because so much of this stuff has so many details to it. We were thinking about if we were to close the 2 smallest schools, those students are close to these other schools, and if they went to the most current local school, then those buildings would go beyond capacity. Now, if you were to re-boundary the whole district at the elementary level, we do have overall capacity for the closure of 2 schools. But that would mean significant movement in terms of boundaries. So I just want to clarify that, because as we were working through this list of questions, we were thinking about it one way. We had a question come back to us looking at it differently, and so I wanted to bring that to your attention. The other thing I want to bring to your attention is on this document, which was the request from Sammy. The last column in the main section there is around proposed class size targets, and it has 24 basically by grade level. And I want to make sure that you know, as we've done our work in the past, that that's the average. K1 is looking at 22 students, and then it grows a little bit based on grade level. But that is just the average. So that was another question that came up recently that I thought we should clarify after this packet came out. So those are the 2 things that I think are important to share. Yeah.
On those, thank you for this. On the numbers for the target, for the K-8 school, you've got the target class size average of 24. What's the average class that's used currently for Franklin for 6, 7, 8 compared to the other?
It's 29. It's the same as at the other middle schools.
Okay, so you just didn't break that out on here.
Correct.
Okay.
To that level of detail.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any questions on any, or more clarification on those? Go ahead, Sammy.
First of all, I want to thank Ryan and the team for providing this data. Really help us get the context and see the data. Before I delve there, I just want to remind us that we have also other 2 advisors to the board, our student representatives, and I want to just invite them to feel comfortable also to participate with questions or insights as well. My question is, this is still a point of time of a trend of 2 years. One may ask, with the enrollments being declining but not as aggressive as the last 2 years, but we're still declining since the 70s, is there any insights you believe we need to pay attention to beyond these 2 years? I know there's so much uncertainty if I want to project for 28, 29, 20, and 30, but is there anything that we need to pay attention beyond this snapshot?
I think it's those things we've talked about in the past, which are that our 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade cohorts are over 500 students, and our K1, 2, 3 cohorts are closer to that 300, 320 mark. So we will still see, as we've talked about year over year, a decline as that group of students graduates. Based on birth rates, we're not seeing cohorts of 500 coming in over the next 4 years, and so we will continue to see that. The other thing that I think is important to note is that at the elementary level, the intermediate grades are larger than the primary grades, so there will still be some reduction in the number of students in our elementaries, not as significant as it was initially, but we will see a little bit more of a decline there too.
Thank you.
Sure.
And so that stands to reason then that as the elementary grades reach middle school, these smaller elementary school size classes reach the middle school, that our need for middle school space is going to change as well.
Yes, depending on what, if you're doing if you're talking about sixth grade, then you're probably 4 years out from that starting to happen.
Other questions before we have more discussion on the questions? Are they questions about these or based on the, are we ready for discussion, I guess? Is
These are clarifying.
clarifying questions before? Okay.
I want to see which ones we've already tackled.
Okay, yeah, okay. Let's just hang on for a second. Does anybody else have any clarifying? Go ahead.
I'm not sure where this fits, but there's a lot of questions on the document from the community, and I just wonder how we're going to answer those to the community.
Beyond the FAQ. So say more about that, because I think we're doing our best to keep up with all the questions that are coming in by writing that FAQ.
Right. So on this document that we got, there were a lot of questions from community, and are those all? Like I spent a lot of time reading all this, and maybe I missed it, but
we have done our best. The fourth section of that report is related to questions we received, and we've done our best to do a crosswalk between those two to make sure that the things that are in there have been answered in the FAQ.
okay, because I tried to do the same, but there's so much.
If you find an area that you don't feel like we've answered, we're going to continue to update the FAQ for the next month as we go along, and so please point that out to us, because we're trying to. I mean, I think our FAQ's at 40-some pages now. We're trying to answer everything that's coming in.
Chris, are you asking about questions that have come in about this report?
No,
or questions that are in the report?
The questions that
Okay.
came in during the community sessions.
Okay, thank you,
They're
because
all
I was like,
listed
because
here.
we have had many questions.
And then
so-
there's the emails that we've received too.
I
that
think
you've
those,
done a great
yeah,
job.
and I think those ones are also making their way into the FAQ. So those ones, even though we're still answering them because they came in, there's other community members that might have those same questions. So I appreciate that they are getting put into the FAQs. That way people can see those as well.
Yeah.
And so, thank you for clarifying. I was just like, because we've had questions about the actual, this too, which Ryan already answered one of them, on the stoplight report, so.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you.
Did you find your clarifying question? Okay, go ahead, Therese.
So I have a couple, but I think they're quick, just wanting to make sure I'm understanding correctly before we have discussion. So one is with the new 10-day enrollment number out and it being a little bit larger than we had originally budgeted, does this change the gap, the size of the gap that needs to be closed in a significant or important way?
Long term, it makes a difference. We are paid on the highest of the 2 years in terms of the ADMW. And so, and that's average daily membership, so that's throughout the school year, so this is just a point in time, which is also kind of an important piece to have in mind. But we're paid on the higher of the 2 years, so it would basically mean that if we continue to decline in enrollment, we'd still get paid at a higher rate next year, because it was more than what we projected in terms of enrollment when we made those projections last December.
Okay, thank you. And then a question about, on the subject of the closure of the elementary schools and the numbers, I wanted to make sure I'm understanding this. So as you answered this question, were you answering this from the capacity of the elementary schools if the 6th grade moves back to the elementary schools?
We've answered it, I've answered it both ways, actually.
Okay.
The most recent one that I was trying to clarify tonight was related to the going to K-5s and closing 2 elementary schools, so not making the change at middle school. And the capacity and the numbers for towards capacity. and this is again fairly nuanced, so Adams it would be at 91%, keeping in mind that capacity in our mind is 90% full.
Right.
So of that 90%, 91% towards capacity.
Okay.
Bessie Coleman would be close to 80, Garfield would be close to 90, Letitia Carson would be about 84, and Lincoln would be about 75.
Okay. And so when we've heard people talk about the number of schools that we would need to close, we know in the proposal that the middle school, the closure of a middle school saves more capital for us than the closure of an elementary school.
Correct.
So closing 2 elementary schools is not going to be the same. In terms of numbers,
it's fairly close.
it's fairly close. Okay, then I won't ask the rest of that question. If it's not that big of a difference, then I won't dive into the detail on that. The last thing I was hoping you could speak to before we have discussion is the concerns that were raised about the opportunities for 6th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if the innovation team has had a chance yet. I don't know that you would, but have we had a chance to start conversations about what 6th grade experience would look like if those kids go back to, particularly around sports and music programs?
Again, we have had some initial conversations about that, recognizing that we're trying to keep up with, the timeline of the board. What I would say is that if the board made the decision to also close an elementary school, that the savings there creates some additional capacity in terms of the programming we're able to provide, because again, there's more savings in that consolidation plan than in the initial proposal that I provided you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sammy.
On the last answer, what opportunities we may lose by going, for lack of better words, by going more aggressive in savings in terms of buildings? So if we go for a middle school and elementary, are there any opportunities are going to be missed by going that aggressive compared to the initial proposal?
I think, one of the things we heard tonight was around the culture of a community. And that decision would influence another community's culture. And I think that would be an additional cost that the board would accept in making that decision. Does that answer your question?
It absolutely answers the question. It does not answer what's the dollar value on a culture of a community, and I don't think any one of us can answer that, but it does give me that balance. Is if we don't go that aggressive, we may be preserving more community culture. Let me add to this. You said 4 years from now, we're forecasting tougher situations. We're trending into a place where we may need to make difficult decisions again in the next 5 or 10 or 3 years. I don't know. Do you feel your answer stands the same looking 3-4 years from now as well with what we know?
I think that we'll have to, again, that's why there's the component about coming back to the conversation around high schools. If things stay as they are, I think that's where there will be another decision point for this school district and this community. And I also think that in this proposal to save our elementary schools, our neighborhood schools, I understand that there's people who think that language is different. This proposal is really about that. And I also know that the long term, the ability to keep all of those K-6s open is still a question for this community in terms of our enrollment and our construction and all of those pieces. And so I think that there's the possibility that you'll have to make a decision related to that down the road as well. Again, it's really hard to go beyond what you see in birth rates and the projections we have from that, and also just the retention rate of students year over year. And so that those pieces are still a little bit like looking in a crystal ball, but we also have to be realistic about some of those conversations that may have to come.
Thank you.
Ryan, I think that what you just said, I wanted to remind us, even as board members, that we only have information for like 5 years. And so we can theorize around beyond that, but those are the only numbers we have, right? So I think we need to keep that in mind too, as we have the conversation. Go ahead, Brittany.
Follow up on Sammy's question. Is there an assumption on your part that the state reimbursement rate is going to be constant? Do you foresee a scenario where the state reimbursement rate would be lower?
So in my career, I have seen one time where the state, twice during a school year, pulled back the amount that they were allocating to school districts. And that is the period of time where many school districts did furlough days. And that was a way to continue to move forward short term, understanding that that was the result of a recession. The conversations we're having right now with this state have some similarities, but they have one difference, and that is that we are also looking at a state that has significant savings, and that was not the case at that point in time. They had spent down all of their savings. So there are concerns at the state level around funding for K-12, specifically because of things like Medicaid and how those systems are being changed dramatically. And so we are paying attention to that. But from my experience, that has only happened one time. And that's also one of the reasons why, as we've talked about reserves in the school district, and people have lots of ideas about those, how they should be spent or not spent, that was put into place at that time so that this district had fewer furlough days than neighboring communities. And so that is one of the current hydraulics that we have in our favor because we have those.
Other questions before we have discussion?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Laura.
So I understand that in the beginning of the year you set like an enrollment capacity for each of the high schools, and would that capacity change once the Corvallis Junior High starts feeding students into the high schools? Say there's a lot of students asking for a transfer, like eighth graders asking for transfer to one school. Would you change that capacity so one school allows more students to transfer into it?
Do you want to talk about our transfer process?
Sure. So I don't know that we would change the capacity, but I think what you're asking is, would we put like a ceiling on how the number of kids that could transfer from one to the other? Is that what we're kind of getting to? The district has transfer policies, and one of them is a resident transfer policy, and that is connected to another policy that talks about enrollment and boundaries. So in connection, a long time ago, one of those policies set a goal that said that if we need to do it, we can say that enrollment at the secondary schools need to remain plus or minus 7% of the average of the number of high school students or middle school students. So that exists, and we could put that into place to make sure to hold tight to enrollments at both schools using a transfer process. So currently, though, when it comes to transfers, we have a lot more students who transfer to CV from CHS boundary or from out of boundary than we have transferring into CHS. So we would just continue to monitor what that looks like and make sure that we're not creating an imbalance where all of a sudden more students are headed to CHS. And we can control that using the policies we have in place and the board.
Shauna has a question.
Sure, thank you. I have a whole list, but I think most fall into the discussion part. So just one clarifying question that I do have related to the consolidation proposal capacity summary. In looking at the number of students that are in projected enrollment, if there was a consolidation of middle schools, is 680. Something that stood out to me as a worry was seeing the 94% next to that. And actually, in looking at the numbers, this is something I just wanted to clarify and check my math on. It looks like that 94% is not that the school would actually be at 94% capacity, but would be at 94% of the capacity goal of 85%. Is that correct? Correct. Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that, because that, in seeing that and seeing that the projected or the hoped for number would be 85% at a middle school, and then seeing how far it seemed to swing in the opposite direction, that's not actually 94% capacity, it's 94% toward an 85% capacity level.
Correct. Our enrollment capacities have already used our utilization factor, so that 85% is already applied. So,
okay.
Correct.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. And for community members who saw that as well, who might see that number and feel concerned like I did when I first saw it, before really diving into what that number meant.
That's similar to the numbers I shared about the closure of 2 elementaries. It's again over 90% towards a 90% capacity rating.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for asking that, Shauna. Did somebody else have it? Did you have your hand up, Jada? I thought you did. Go ahead, Leah.
If we were to see consolidation between the 2 high schools past the 28-29 school year, if we are over capacity, which I believe is 1,900, the number is 2025. So would we use multiple facilities to carry all those students at Corvallis High School if we were to consolidate?
There are a number of spaces at CV that are really important. So as an example, science labs across both of our schools is an area where we don't have enough science labs in one of our schools alone. We continue to improve our CTE spaces at Crescent Valley. So there are spaces that we're going to continue to need as a community. So those are the kind of, as we move forward with conversations around high schools, those are some of the pieces we're going to have in mind, because you bring up a good point, and there are spaces there that we would need students to be able to continue to access.
Sorry, I know you're looking at straight numbers too, and you were talking about 1,900, but we were going to look at it at did you say 2025, like the number 2025? Yeah. So the other thing to understand is that in those Corvallis High School and CV numbers, they also include students who attend College Hill. So they're wrapped into those numbers and they're not pulled out. So you want to pull out whatever the enrollment is at that high school at that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, how many students attend College Hill, like as of right now?
150? I think we're at about 150 right now, maybe.
Across the programs we serve,
yeah,
we provide there.
Sorry, that's including the GED program.
That's our construction program, urban farm, kids who attend College Hill High School, and GED. It's around that approximate number.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions? Everybody asked all the questions, so I just got to ask that because everybody's asking them. So that's great. Thanks, everyone.
So what I'm wondering, Jer, is if Lou, sorry,
you're fine.
I know you don't like that. If we want to work through those questions, or if we want to just move into discussion because you've had a chance to ask some of those questions. Again, I am flexible about how we move forward. My only request is that I know what I do next. And so it's up to this body to decide how best to do that.
Can you put the questions that Ryan had proposed to guide the conversation again? Okay. Do these feel like ones that we can chat about?
I think, are they important? I don't want to use the word important. Are they valuable to chat about, or is it better to just move into a discussion?
What do you all think? I'm okay either way because I think I see value in going over some of these to help guide the conversation, and I also know that people might want to also discuss, and so just thinking about time too. So yeah, we spent a half hour asking clarifying questions, for example, almost. And so I want to make sure that we keep that in mind as a board. And I do think it's important that we take time in asking questions and having discussion, because it's not like this is not a light decision by any means. So I just wanted to let people know that we may be asking ourselves to stay a little bit longer this evening too. I just wanted to put that out there ahead of time. Judah?
Chair, I do need to be excused at 9:30.
Okay. Either one of you, whoever wants to say something.
I was just going to answer the question of I like going through these questions only because I think our discussions, there's just so much, and I think our discussions can be very broad and involve a lot of going through different avenues, and this kind of gives us like a guideline where to start and bring in our discussions and our questions as we're moving along.
Is that what you were going to say, Shauna? Similar?
Yes, in a sense of saying I think they're helpful as guiding questions and maybe as themes, because I look at it and I think, oh, one of my questions would fit under the first, maybe not exactly in answering that question, but under the theme of that question. So if we can broadly define, I'd be comfortable with that.
What about the say?
Yeah, I agree with that too. It's a good framework to hang everything on, but I really like that we're starting with the long-term goals. I think we always need a clarification of strategy, what the long-term strategy is to inform everything else.
Okay. Cool. Are you facilitating the questions, Ryan, or am I doing that?
I think that at this point, I'd prefer to turn it over to you.
Okay.
So that
makes sense.
it leads to more discussion rather than Q&A.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep.
So the first question up there is, what are our long-term goals for student learning? I think that's what it says, right? Equity and community engagement. The box is over part of it, but I thought that's what it was saying. And if you have questions that, I think that's a good idea, like y'all are saying, if you have questions that fall under those buckets, it would be a good time to bring them up too. So whoever wants to start answering. I see Judah unmuted.
So less of a question, more of a request, which I know everybody wants to hear. So just to be transparent to the community, my overarching personal thinking in all of this is that what makes Corvallis School District special is not the buildings, it's the people inside the buildings, and that it's truly the staff, teachers, families, and students that makes things important. So to be preserving as much faculty and staff as we possibly can, and to see how that's reflected. How is this closure, potentially this closure, saving our teachers and saving our staff? Like, so what do we get to keep out of that, which we would otherwise have to cut if we're not closing a building? So who do we get to keep because we're doing this? And to think about giving back all the things that we've taken away with cuts. So what comes back to our high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools that was such a painful cut. I'm thinking, about arts, library, all the music. And so that is my long-term goal, is preservation of our faculty and staff, and providing and restoring as much of the things that we've had to slice down because of budgetary reasons.
And I wanted to add on to what Judah's saying just really quickly, because before that we lost a lot of EAs too. And so I think that is felt from what we've been hearing in classrooms too, as far as not having some of the supports that used to be there. And I know that was all COVID money that went away, which was a bummer, but I'm just saying it did show that it had results when there's folk in there, and I don't know that we would ever get back to that. But yeah.
The hard part in those two priorities is that they impact each other. The ability to retain staff in a lot of ways means we keep more buildings open, but by keeping more buildings open, the services we're able to provide begin to be less, which is sort of what we've seen at our elementaries over the last couple of years as enrollment has dropped. And so it's really this piece between how many of our buildings do we decide to close and how that impacts the numbers of programs we're able to provide.
Well, I'm assuming, so like when we're making cuts, it's been that most of that is coming from FTE, like that's going to be sliced down. So if we're thinking about cuts regardless, that's going to be, we're still staring down FTE with some of the, the wonderful people that work here that we desperately want to keep. So to say, even to the community a little bit, that by doing this and by closing this building, here's the things that we are cutting that are not FTE, that are not our staff.
Whoever wants to go.
Okay, so kind of, I think, foiling off of what Jude was saying about the idea of what we could restore, I think what I'm hearing, what it's prompting me to think about is that right now we use a model for figuring out how many people we need to be someplace based on the number of kids that are there, and that makes sense because you need enough people. But I think that in the concept of restoring, it could come just as simply as in saying that one of the things we're going to approach this consolidation process with is how do we give our buildings a little more flexibility by asking as part of the consolidation that we build in additional FTE to the remaining buildings that don't fit into that equation, that don't fall under the you need this many people because you have this many kids, but say we need this many people because we need this much contact time of, I'll go to our libraries as an example. Right now our libraries are not open all day, and more kids in the building would theoretically maybe add a little bit more time in because we've got another classroom of kids, and so we need a little bit more in there. But what if we decided that what we were going to prioritize is when we close these buildings, we're putting back in the remaining buildings adequate library time to say that's something that we are going to prioritize giving back. And I think that's what I'm hearing you say. And I think when we think about the workforce multiplier that a library space is for a school, that seems like a wise investment to say, we are making a lot of changes and we're going to protect this sacred space that is such a safe place for so many kids and give teachers another resource and give kids another spot to be able to go. And it doesn't matter that the ratio in that particular building doesn't need 7 hours. It matters that our kids in the building need 7 hours of library, however many are in there. They need to be able to use it all day long. And so that's where, when I think about the long-term, for student learning, I think we need our libraries open for the whole school day. And I would like to see us talk about how we're going to do that. When we consolidate and put more kids into a space, we need to reopen some spaces in those buildings to more capacity. I think that I heard that in the community comments, and that resonates as something that may mean that we save a little bit less in the consolidation process, but it does give us something back that we don't right now have another way to get back. So anyway, that's my thought on that. And
my question, I guess, Teresa, would be like, that sounds like super operational. And so that would be like, how do we, as a board, how would we guide that process?
We can't guide the process because it is operational, but the question right now is what are our goals for student learning? And so I'm saying that I think it's not operational to say a goal is we're protecting access to important learning spaces when we restaff.
I just want to make sure that
absolutely
understood in the community where you're coming from.
Because community, we can't tell the buildings where they're going to put their staff. But we can say, as a student learning outcome, this is something that we think is important. And now we're saying, schools, how are you going to do that? And one of the ways is think about how do we protect the spaces that the community has told us over and over are really important to the learners.
So to maintain expectation, recognizing that the proposal that we brought to you still has about $2 million in reductions, and 85% of our funding, the ways we spend our dollars are on people. And so to be adding people is, with the initial proposal, will be a challenge. So I just want to make sure that we're sort of managing expectations around that piece, or I'm managing the expectations of the board around that piece.
Shauna, you were next, and then Sammy.
Direct follow-up. Was it a direct follow-up? Well, and I think that's one of the tensions that I know I'm holding, hearing in the community too, is, you know, in terms of thinking about some of these examples coming up of what could be preserved with consolidation. You know, we know that there's a budget challenge and crisis in the community. That was something that community members also acknowledged during listening sessions, even if they came and said, well, there's nothing that I like about the proposal, or there's something I like about the proposal. And that tension of having to make a consolidation decision before knowing what we're moving toward. And something that I've heard from a number of families in the community is, if, you know, Judah, back to your point of, if we knew we were going to something wonderful where many of our children's favorite teachers were going to be there, their friends were going to be there, and they had more opportunities, shifting buildings wouldn't feel so hard. And we don't know what we're moving toward. And so that's something that I'm thinking about as I'm thinking about long-term goals. And I know the innovation team is deeply engaged in moving this forward, and just wanting to also acknowledge that the timing of that will be coming after a consolidation decision. And so it also makes it very hard to say, where do you best put your consolidation to make sure the district has the best chance to actually be able to do things that feel innovative, that feel like there's the FTE to bring back, preserve programs that are meaningful to students and families. And along those lines is a question that's been coming up is, what are some of the benefits of consolidation? Because we've been talking a lot about just consolidation as a way of saving money. And so one of the questions that comes up for me along with that is, and I thank Erica for bringing this up in public comment today, around the pros and cons of a K-5 versus a K-6 model. What does the research say could be a benefit under what conditions of a K-6 model? And so an ask that I have is, and I'll defer Lou and to the board too, in terms of district effort on this, even in doing some basic literature review that I've done myself over the past couple of weeks and looking at what are some of the pros and cons of a K-6 model, there are actually some tremendous benefits if the conditions are a certain way through K-6. So just to share a little of what I've learned, and maybe encouraging if there's some messaging in the district as well around what are the pros and cons, what does give the best chance for this to work. There is research showing that there are actually stronger academic outcomes in 6th grade for K-6 models in reading, math, as well as standardized tests, fewer disciplinary issues, less bullying, better and stronger school culture and climate in staying in that environment longer, a familiar environment, better social and emotional outcomes, opportunities for cross-grade mentorship, and that's contingent on some of the things that Erica brought up in terms of, are there opportunities for students to have this scaffolded experience where they actually get to change classrooms, where they have a schedule that looks a little bit more like a middle school schedule, where they have access to some of that practice, maybe not of that full middle school day, but they are getting specializations and those opportunities. So there is research showing that a K-6 model actually can have stronger outcomes for 6th graders, but it's contingent on how it's run and what the resources are and what the opportunities are, rather than taking them away. Because we can also see it as serving as a bonus 5th grade year where students aren't feeling like they have that growth, that opportunity. They're missing out on those electives, on that structure that really helps them prepare for that transition to school. So that was a thought that I had around understanding the district's perspective on that, and what are things we could look forward to if that model was adopted, and what are the risks? We also know that there are needs in terms of teacher endorsements, certifications, specializations, and models around how that would work. But just wanted to offer that as something that I think could be helpful for us as a board to understand, as well as helpful for the community.
Sammy?
I have
And then Bernie.
Thank you. I will take a stab at both questions 1 and 4. What are our long-term goals for student learning, equity, and community engagement? And I hope I will end with, how do we define success once consolidation occurs? And full disclosure, I'm going to cheat. The school board and the community spent hours on a document in front of me, which I'm going to reflect on, 2024-2029 board goals. And I'm going to highlight a few things. We have 4 North Stars, 4 goals. And before we start talking about the goals, we said, and by we is the collective we, community, school board, agreed that this is the document that will define our 4 North Stars that we will rally ourselves toward, and the superintendent will be held accountable to get toward. And before we talked about this 4 stars, we said student voice is a core tenet of school board. Student identity should not predict or predetermine success in school. We want our students to succeed and have their voice and success in school, no matter what their race, culture, socioeconomic or family status or national origin, language ability, gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation. I know I'm saying things that are obvious for us, and we hash them a lot, but I want to elevate them because this is the bottom line. Everything we do, the how and what we want to do, is going to help us with those 4 North Star. Excellent learning experience, where exceptional learning experience, all students learn at high level, is goal number 1, and there are 5 strategies there. And I want you to think about conflicting or challenges between goals as I reflect on those. The second milepost or second North Star is equitable systems. We want to transform our educational systems to be diverse, equitable, and inclusionary. Our decisions and actions create belonging for all students, families, and staff. We have agreed on 4 strategies to accomplish that goal. The third North Star is relevant and engaging learning. Students will participate in relevant learning experiences that supports their short and long-term goals toward evolving future. We agreed on 5 strategies to get there. Last but not least, and this is an important part, there's a 4th North Star, healthy communities. We will cultivate schools and a district that promotes wellness through social, emotional, mental, physical health well-being of students and families. I did cross through some nuance in every goal. We have 5 strategies there. The most important part for this conversation is something we highlighted in the bottom of the document with asterisk and italicized. What is that? Goals are not written in priority order. And if we have 4 North Stars, and now we have a challenge or a problem or an opportunity, my question to myself about what are the long-term goals is, are the 4 goals sustainably being achieved year after year, long-term? And I will define success once consolidation occurs, that we're not sacrificing one goal over the other, and we're not being, for lack of better words, I'm going to use the common saying, we're not being penny wise and a dollar foolish. So I hate to quote something that I started teaching in a class about cost techniques. In corporate America, they say money is not the most important thing in a company or institution. It's the only important thing. I believe the dollars help us achieve our goals long term, and that's where I want us to really reflect. It's not about the dollar value. We heard the community. It's not about the savings. It's about what we do with it. And I really appreciate Ryan's response about, here's what you sacrifice, some things that are immeasurable that we want to be mindful of. So to conclude, what I'm trying to share is I want to center the goals that we have agreed on for the years 24 to 29, and also be very mindful that any hows or any techniques or any decisions we make now will help us balance our prioritization of all 4 goals with each other and equitably achieve as much as possible of the 4 of them, not one over the other long term.
Mine is actually a follow-on on Shauna's ask. In addition to K to 6, you are proposing adding a K to 8. So what I like to hear is, what are you going to do with that program? What are the programmatic changes? What are the curricular changes that you're going to do? In our community listening sessions, we heard a lot of not so well. There seems to be some sort antibodies against Franklin, and so are we replicating that? Or are we making a complementary program when we make two K-8 programs? So I'd like to hear more about that and get more information on that in addition to what Shauna asked.
Go ahead, Chris.
Along with all of those goals that are, or questions that are up there, my question is more about kind of an overall basis of what is our staff, what are our teachers saying with the consolidation, and how are we getting input from them? I know they were invited to the listening sessions, but I also know that as a past staff member, that's not probably an avenue I would have attended to give my input. And so how are we getting them involved? Because they are our future. And yeah, how are we getting their input, basically?
We don't have all the answers, but we'll just get started with them. We've taken the HR team to both middle schools in the last week to talk about what the consolidation plan proposal, how that would impact staffing, so we could get some questions for them about what's kind of on top for them. But that was one point in time. Ryan spent tons of time visiting both schools to talk to staff to get their questions. What I remember from Ryan sharing was that the teachers are concerned about their kids, like what's going to happen with these kids. You know, they've been with us. We know how to move them on to high school. We know how to welcome them in from middle, but like what do we do when they're going away from us? And so I think that is a concern that they have as far as their heart. But they are having opportunities to do some planning and talking with innovation team.
Yeah, so the innovation team has about 30 staff members on the team, and that group is not necessarily like informing like other different consolidation possibilities, but more about like future. And right now, that team is really thinking about the future of education in Corvallis and like what are the knowledge and skills we want students to have. I know some of you got to partake in a few different versions of that, and so. In that, though, what's happening is I'm rarely also getting text messages and chats and emails and phone calls from innovation team members who are staff members in our district who are like, today at lunch, a group of us sat and talked about this thing. And so I've been keeping kind of like notes and like lists to bring to us from those pieces. But the other part where there'll be more voice for staff in our pieces that we're working on is we're doing a backwards design from the innovation team, starting with where we want the outcomes to be for the knowledge and skills we hope students gain in our school district. And then we're starting to get feedback on those pieces. And so there'll be opportunities for every single staff member to give feedback on some of that work. We just started getting feedback like from the district equity team, from our administrators. We have a group of students the first week of December of all of our SAFE students will be giving feedback on that. We've surveyed 250 high school students on what was great about middle and elementary school and what they would change and what did learning look like for them and what should learning look like for them. And then staff will have those same type of opportunities to give that feedback too.
Can I go back to Bernie and Shauna's question for just a minute? I think that one of the pieces that makes that difficult for us to answer that question is because we don't yet know what consolidation looks like. And in by saying that, what I mean is, are you leaning towards the proposal, the initial proposal, or are you leaning towards going further in terms of consolidation? As I shared before, going further in consolidation frees up additional resources to add programming in a way that this proposal wouldn't. And so I really appreciated the perspective earlier about what it's like to be a sixth grader, and we're trying to make sure that those pieces are robust, and we're also limited by budget. And so the piece that's important, I think, for me to better understand from you would be that piece is, as a board, are you leaning towards the proposal and bringing back information related to what that would look like with this proposal? Are you looking towards deeper consolidation? And if so, what that proposal would allow us to be able to do? Because those two things are different. And I think that's an important part of this conversation. And that is contrasted with what it means for another school community to close. And that is the piece that, as a board, I think is the most difficult decision that you have to make. And that's where I think that's why that question would be, I'd answer it differently, understanding that piece.
But I guess when you first presented this proposal, there must have been some thoughts given on the K to 6 model and why you pick a K to 8 model for Mountain View. So that's independent of what our decisions is going to be. So I just want to hear the thoughts behind that, and why do you think that would be a good, that was a workable proposal you gave us.
So I think, so one of the things I think that's interesting, just like sometimes like assumptions about like research and pieces like that. And so our student growth and experience department and our like leadership team there, actually a big function of our jobs just regularly, not even through consolidation, just ongoing, is to keep up on what is the best educational research? What is the best type of programming for students? I'd love to compare a reference list, because for months I've been doing the same thing of what is the best research and the pros and cons of K8s or K5s or K2s in one building and 3.5s in one building, right? And like we know from research, there's so many pieces that can be true for different things in different circumstances. And so really where I keep going back to, and this is from like John Hattie's research, if we think about collective efficacy, that has like the biggest impact on student learning, the biggest effect size when we look at that. And some of the ways to be able to build collective efficacy amongst educators is when you have time and space and collaboration together. And the longer that you can create that time and space and environment where that cross collaboration, that multidisciplinary approach, that creative approach sometimes with educators, you have a greater impact. And so part of the reasons when you think about K6 or K8, it allows for an alignment that can happen that doesn't necessarily happen in a K5 or a 6-8, because there's built-in transitions between those. And so when we think about like the research you're talking about, when the conditions are right with some of the different options in those intermediate grades that replicate more choice in scheduling, and then when educators can be together for maybe a longer, more educators together that can help students from K through 6 or K through 8, because K8 actually, in most research shows, even has stronger outcomes than a K6. And I think part of that, the nuance in there, is because educators have time to align and work together. So the 8th grade teacher can go down to the kindergarten teacher and learn how they taught numeracy when they're trying to teach maybe pre-algebra or something at that grade. And so that opportunity doesn't exist when educators are split up. And so I would go back to, you could find pros and cons for lots of different models, but when we can create the conditions where educators can vertically work together across grades for a longer period of time and get really aligned on what skills kids need to learn and what knowledge they need to learn at each grade level, and then they can backfill and like know what didn't happen in the grade level before, the stronger outcomes we can have academically for kids. So I think in the research I look at, that's what I look for. Versus some of the other pros and cons that are more nuanced by funding or by programs or grants or things like that.
So I think some of my ask, and maybe yours, Bernie, too, was around how do we share that information with families more broadly? So you've clearly done a lot of that work, and even just shared some of it right now. But in terms of having something for families to be thinking about, rather than really just looking at, okay, there are scary things coming up, and there are sad things and hard things coming up. Are there things to look forward to? How do we know that? Under what conditions? What can they be asking for, advocating for, looking for? So just a thought there.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add into the part about long-term goals for community engagement, that's one of them, is like sharing information a little bit more, because I think that could help answer a lot of questions if the community knows like that you all have been looking at this, because I was under the assumption that you have been looking into these things, but there may have been an assumption because it hasn't been discussed that people thought it hasn't been looked at. And so I think that those kind of things are important for community engagement. And with the community listening sessions and the feedback, how many families do you think we have in the district? Is there like a rough estimate for a number of families?
Well, I think if you think families have 1.5 kids, 1.5 students, and we have about 5,700 families, then I would do that by 1.5, or you basically thinking about families as that. And so 3,500.
Okay, I think that's really important for people to think about, because this packet is representing 136 people. And that is not reflective of the majority of who's in the district. So when I think about community engagement, I wonder like how to call more in from community to contribute, or to feel like there's a way for them to contribute. And I don't know what the barriers are. That's something I think that is part of the ongoing forever with boards probably. And I think that we've been doing what we can to increase community engagement over the years. I just wanted to point that out, because sometimes people think that that's like, maybe if we did like some math and did like that represents 3 people per thing, that's still like way under the majority of families in this district. And so I think that's important for us to think about, both as a board and for community members that are reading this information. And I think we have a lot of stuff in the FAQs too that that is also not in this packet too, but there's some crossover in it, of course, but because this was about the community engagement ones, I do think that this process still works though, and has helped give us really valuable information. And that was one of the things I was excited about, having been involved with the goal setting when we did the same kind of process. I still think we get really good outcomes out of it. And people seem to have been okay with the goals we set through that process. So I'm hoping that it has similar results, where we're going to come to a decision that the community can live with. I don't know if it necessarily means everybody's happy with it, because nobody wants to close schools and see staff go. And I did want to do a time check, because we are past our hour now at this point. So seeing where we are on the agenda though is, if I can find it, we have so many papers right now. Yeah, and so I mean we'll still be okay if we add another probably 20 minutes on to the conversation. Can you add 20 minutes? Thank you. Yeah, well, they're not required to be here tonight, and I already told them. Yeah, they can go at any time. Yeah. Okay, so I think we've been bouncing around on the questions. That was my other thing I wanted to point out to everybody, that we don't have to go in order, and we have not been going in order. I think we have been going over these questions, and I wanted to do a pulse check for the board on, are we still engaging in these questions? Are we doing more open discussion? Or are we doing a combo? Because I feel like we're doing a combo.
I think it's a combo.
Okay. Yeah. Are you all okay with doing that?
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page on the process for our discussion. And so we can keep chatting. Go ahead, Trace.
So I appreciated the conversation that we had. I also, because this board, we are information. This is what we do with our free time. Also did a quick search. I also found interesting information about the strength of K-8. It made me wonder if we thought about whether or not all of our schools should be K-8. I don't know how feasible that is, but if the K-8 model is as strong as some of the literature says, like, really, why would we look at any other model? Was curious. So I also have an interest in understanding a little bit more about the, you didn't happen upon K6 just because that's where the kids would fit. So I would love, not tonight probably, because we have 19 minutes, but I think it would be really valuable, and I would appreciate understanding what made that particular model stand out to you, as opposed to the other options that are out there. And then I think I heard you, Ryan, maybe I'm wrong, but I felt like you were kind of maybe hinting at that we need to rip the Band-Aid off and say something about what do we think of this proposal, because that needs to happen tonight, and that has not happened yet. And so did I read you right on that at some point you need to leave tonight with something more concrete about?
I mean, that's one of the questions up there.
It is, but
for.
then he kind of, he said that, but then he didn't say specifically, tell me what you think. Like, I want to know, are we at that point? Do you feel like we are at that point where you are looking for us to say, this is what we like or don't like?
I think that's on there too.
What we like or don't like? I can't even read that from over
it
here.
says,
So
how does it support or hinder the goals?
I guess we are
that's
stakeholders.
Kind of,
okay.
Yeah, so I think that was kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump into the deep water then and say that I think the proposal has some things that are important, and I don't feel like, from what I've heard from the community, I don't think this proposal goes far enough in addressing our gap. And I think it sets us up, if we only do this, to be in a very painful position again far sooner than we need to be. I think I would like to see a proposal that takes us a little bit further in closing the gap. And that closing more of the gap right now, I think, gives us the time to really think about a bigger restructuring of our district that we know is coming if the enrollment cliff is what it looks like it's going to be. So there, I said that. That's what I think. I think we need to talk about more cuts.
Judah?
I'm glad Teresa ripped off the Band-Aid, because I was thinking the same thing. And as horrible as it is to feel like you have to say, I would rather see the cuts that we need to make this year instead of making a big cut this year and a big cut next year, and to have that transition happen all at once. So preferably to rip off the Band-Aid instead of stair-stepping, painfully making these transitions to better adjust to what we know in the next 2 years is going to be the budgetary concerns and enrollment concerns that we have on the table.
I would like to add in that it's not just our enrollment right now too, because we're like, there's other declines due to state and federal matters that are impacting our funding too, and so it makes it even harder for the current proposal to make sense in the context of what we're facing budgetary wise. And so I wanted to just add that in, not as like a challenge to anything you all said, but more like I do think I agree with you all on that, and I think we've heard from staff too that this caused a little bit of anxiety too, of knowing that there's additional. I would like to add in that I don't think I would go so far to say that we should put high schools on the table at this point. I would not recommend that, for example.
Yeah, I'm strongly opposed to putting high schools on the table, but
they won't fit anyways. But besides that point, I don't know if that's, because that's been another ask from the community, is to just have that conversation now, and I don't think it's the right time for that at all. After you, Sammy.
I did want to just throw in, because I forgot to say, I would be extremely concerned about saying that let's close 2 elementary schools and then having to redistrict all of our elementary schools, because that means that the majority of our students are going through a major change.
And it wouldn't address the middle school issue in a couple of years. Sammy, your hand was up.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan, for the invitation that we can ask questions regardless of, ask questions freely. So I'm going to ask a question freely here. You heard that we may want to go more aggressively, rip the Band-Aid, quick and probably a little bit more painful. They say sometimes if you do a gradual change, you're more likely to have stability. And if you go strong, sometimes you have pendulum swing back at you somewhere. So I want you to sell me if I would say you gave us the capacity summary, this solves the problem here. What opportunities, the additional potentially $1 million for an additional elementary school on top of that, what opportunity am I missing, and what possible instability other than creating boundary review challenge, other than creating an additional school culture and community being replaced, other than these two, is there any opportunities I'm missing from this proposal that you think is not enough for a steady change?
So I think what you were asking was what opportunities going further would provide?
Yes, and are they worth the sacrifice that we're going further than what solves the problem for the day and probably for a year or two or three?
That's what I'm hoping to understand from the board. As your advisor, I'm trying to give you the information to make an informed decision. I think that what you gain from going further is the possibility of maintaining programming in a way that the current proposal doesn't allow. The cost of that is, again, the impact on a school community. And at this point, we'd be talking about elementary schools because we've already made this. I haven't heard modifications to the K-6 model or the junior high. So I think what I'm hearing is the additional consolidation, which would be the closure of an elementary school. And that has additional community connection, all the things we've talked about thus far. Not trying to discount what happens in junior highs or middle schools, but it tends to feel different to families when you have a 5-year-old.
Yeah. In addition to that, do you feel the capacity summary for a model that includes everything you put on the table for initial proposal plus an additional elementary school, would the utilization with capacity adjustments still be manageable? Are we going to have an increased class size, less flexibility with class size?
We'd have to do some additional modeling, but what I would think is a couple things. One is you would have, it wouldn't modify class sizes because class sizes are built on a ratio that you have in that graph with some slight modification because it's on the average. So that would be different. In terms of the spaces themselves, I don't believe, we still have it built on the 90% capacity up to. And so I think we would want to look at how to do that well with as limit the number of schools that are impacted. So I wouldn't think that a full boundary adjustment would necessarily do that for us or need to happen. I think those are some of the other considerations.
Last but not least, you talked with other school districts with probably similar population decline and student population. Is it unheard of where you could have multiple consolidation steps within a decade or 5 years? Do you see some other school districts went aggressive 1 year to save themselves the hassle of doing it multiple times in a decade?
No, I think most do it more gingerly because it's painful.
More gingerly is like one time.
No, more people do go with the step approach because it's a painful change in the community. But I can tell you that as an example, Bethel, that sometimes is discussed here, they closed Clear Lake Elementary, which they did a year and a half before it closed. And now they're back at the table having conversations about middle schools and are feeling like, gosh, I wish we would have done this all at one time. And at the same time, they made the decision because it's hard and painful to go through all of that at one point in time.
I wanted to think about how we're talking about it too. I don't think we should use the term hassle and coming from those kind of just because I don't think it's hard in general, and so it's saving. I don't know how I would describe it, but just how that landed. I don't know how that lands for the community. So I just wanted, in general, when we're thinking about words, I don't know why that word in particular stood out, but it did.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm not trying to call you out, Sammy, but I was just kind of like, is there another word that we can use? And I don't know if there is, but maybe it's just because it's so hard, right? So
I think the word is grieving. Like this
Yeah,
is
thank
gonna,
you.
there's, this is a loss to our community. Every school in this community is cherished by the people who walk its halls and have graduated from it or have moved into a neighborhood and looked forward to sending their kids there. There is no school that makes the most sense to close from how we feel about them. There are schools that make the paperwork side of doing this maybe a little bit easier, or it might make it seem like, oh, well, this will give us the most return. But that language is that's economic language, and we're in the land of feelings, and we're grieving. I'm grieving that we're having the conversation. We haven't even made a decision, and my heart is already heavy.
Yeah.
Because I've been to every one of these schools, and I don't want to see our community not have any of them. And I also am very worried about the quality of education we can offer if we don't do a hard thing. And so I think the word is grief. And our community, the community listening sessions were one space, the boardroom is another space. Whatever we do, we have to figure out how we're going to carry this grief together, because the alternative is that it divides us and our kids are worse off. But we can find a way to figure out a space where this will come at a cost to everybody. The cost will look different, but no one is getting through this process without bearing some of the cost. And that is hard, and that is sad, and that is grief.
Judah?
Well, I just want to say, like, just to clarify what I was saying, and to jump onto the grief, what I don't want to happen is the community knows that we're going to have to take another big action, and there's rumors and everything swirling around, and everybody worried about, well, what are they going to do for the next year, because they know we have to, and instead doing it.
Or even rumors for years, too, for that matter. Go ahead, Bernie.
Going back to all the discussion and something Byron brought up, we have opportunities, if we increase the time, right, from K to 6 or K to 8, that the 8th grade teacher or the 6th grade teacher can look at it. But that presupposes that we have a steady environment where you're not changing the terms of that. Because if you're looking at a long-term academic change, programmatic change, curricular change, then we got to get the resources as early as possible to make that change happen without additional need for disruption or changing course, right? So, it's sort of like flying a plane. I don't know if you have pilots here. There's a place called V1. That's a decision point where you decide to fly or you decide to go around and line up for takeoff again, abort the takeoff. But the thing is, you go past that point, you're going to crash. Now, the other thing about V1 and flying is also you got to make sure you may be able to take off, but you need to get into a sustainable flight. Keep going, and because it doesn't do anything if we just take off and then crash back down. So that's what I was looking at in terms of resources and the bandage, ripping off the bandage and making as bold a move as possible, because we need to buy that room for us to be in steady flight, and we can continue to climb. And I think if we do it, if it's not enough, we're basically doing a go around and line up for takeoff. And you know what that burns the most on a plane? Gas, resources, because now you're burning additional resources to get no effect at all. So that's what I am sort of. That's why I support the idea of looking at other options. And speaking of other options, we also heard in the listening sessions quite a few about the K to 6 and 7 to 12 model. What about a scenario where we close both middle schools? Now we have that long runtime that Byron was talking about. And I know there are also studies out there that says the effectiveness of that model as well. So I think we should look at all options, not just elementary school.
That's like a really technical question about capacity too, I think, with the larger numbers in the high schools, right?
We've done
We did-
some
do we
work
do
on
that?
the stoplight report around a couple of those other
Yeah.
models.
Yeah. I seen Shauna. Did you have your hand up, Chris? How about Chris, Shauna, and then Sammy?
This is so hard, and there's just so much. I worry about, when I first heard the 712 model, I was like, absolutely not. I can't even imagine putting 7th graders next to 12th graders. I mean, if you look at developmental stages and all of that, that's huge. But if you look at a model of 712 where it's really 2 different programs in one school, then I don't know. Like, that's an option I think to look at. But at this point of the game, I'm just worried. We've done all these community meetings based on closing a middle school. Now we're talking about doing some others, which I agree. I think timing is important, and that we, as mentioned before, look at how we're going to reserve and save so that next year and 2 years we're not doing additional cuts, and that maybe we can look at a strong program at what we have at this time. But I really worry that if we're looking at very different models at this time, at this point, like, what's the community going to say? Like, are we going to give them time to respond to that as well? I mean, it was some of their ideas as well.
I just wanted to point that out, Chris, that we have heard a lot from community that this one is not feeling like it's doing enough.
Yeah.
And so I think that we have heard that feedback, and the consistent thing that I know that in a lot of my responses and even in messaging is that that was an initial proposal based on us asking Ryan to bring us one option. That didn't mean that it was what we ended up adopting, and that's been a very consistent message from both the board and in communications. And so I think that people are thinking that maybe that is the option, but it was an initial proposal that could be modified, has been the consistent message. So while I do think that people would be surprised if it was a different one that came to the board for us to have a first read on, we've been pretty clear that that was not necessarily what we'd see at the end. I just wanted to make sure that was said.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that.
Mm-hmm. I forgot, was it you then? It was you and then Sammy, is that right? Okay, sorry, I was like, I should have wrote it down.
That's okay.
We also have 43 seconds left of our extended time. We're gonna let it turn red so I can see how over time we are with this conversation. Yeah.
Thank you. So I have a short series of related questions. And just in terms of thinking about where to start on this, I really appreciate folks bringing up wanting to look at, I'll say deeper cuts, but looking at how do we put more of the cuts into consolidation efforts that preserve staff, right? We heard from a staff member earlier today that this is bringing up a lot of anxiety for staff. We are hearing that across the board because any consolidation comes with reduced FTE as well. And I think one of our goals or hopes is that we are putting more of the cuts into buildings and less into staff FTE as well as possible. So in my questions, I just want to also name that, and any if scenarios that come up also feel very heavy in terms of saying, if this closed or if that closed or if this happened. We are talking about more school communities. So my series of questions are around, Ryan, I think you addressed this a little bit earlier, and I just wanted to make sure it was really clear. When we're thinking about length of time, if a middle school were to close next year, and that was where the cuts in the consolidation cuts stopped, the rest came from FTE, how long would it be, do you estimate, before we'd have to have a closure of an elementary school? And then the same vice versa. If there were 1 or 2 elementary schools that closed this year rather than a middle school, how long would it be in projections before we were having the conversation again about a middle school?
Kim can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that you're probably going to be back at the table in about 3 years to have another conversation about it, some sort of closure or consolidation.
Okay, so within 3 years, we'd probably be looking at both unless something changed.
I would think so.
Okay. Another question. Last year, and I may get some of the numbers wrong. It's late, and it's been a while since we've had our previous year's budget conversation. But we had, I think it was about $3 million that were cut last year, predominantly from staffing. And I know that some of that came from, I don't want to make light of any cuts to staffing, but some of it came from natural attrition of needing fewer classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that one of the numbers that was brought out was specials. I think it was about $800,000 was cut music-wise or to other specials. And some was very, very apparent to students and families in terms of the experience that students have. Some felt less so, even though we're talking about people losing people, because it did come with natural attrition in the classroom. When we think about the $4 million that we're looking at for this next year, we know that now from seeing all of these just very helpful estimates, that a middle school is about $2 million in consolidation savings. We know that does come with some reduced FTE as well. An elementary school, and Franklin is included in that because of the cost savings, is about $1 million. And so as we're talking about the need to look at what a deeper cut might be, what do you have a sense of the level of cut that would be needed? That, you know, it may not be a full $4 million because we're also looking at some natural attrition of classrooms that aren't going to impact student experience or family experience with the school.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of what level of cut in consolidation would help preserve so we could actually either maintain a status quo of services and people for students and specials and options versus being able to add?
That's a really hard question to answer.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to skirt it.
Yeah.
But in the middle of October, with all of the things that happen during a school year, to be able to say that, I think that you position yourself in a more positive way to maintain programming by making a deeper cut at this point in time. I think you are at a point where maintenance, there will be positions that are lost when you close schools. We know that to be the case. But in terms of maintaining programming that we currently have, it puts you in a really strong position to do that, if not the ability to bring back some additional programming that we've lost. I think we're close to either one of those by going further at this point.
Okay. And so just in thinking about that, and just wanted to chime in and affirm what other board members have shared, that I think it's important to look at least to consider what deeper cuts would look like, whether that was adding and I just even hate to say that, an elementary school, or looking at some of the other models that do come with deeper cuts. Not necessarily to consider all those changes happening all at once, but another ask that I've heard from the community is, and just a concern, is how this has been a long process. I know that there have been so many steps that have come along with this, and the piece that the community feels the most deeply from the time the consolidation proposal was announced to the decision feels like the shortest amount of time for the hardest part. And so a question that I've heard from folks is, why wasn't this brought up, or why wasn't it planned earlier? If we are looking at deeper cuts, I think a piece of that should also be considering if something comes to the table. I know it may not preserve things for the next year, but weighing out the cost benefit of if we're looking at one cut this year and one cut that is planned, that deepens that consolidation cut that saves staff in a second year, so that families know it's coming, so that staff know it's coming. I know there are pros and cons with that too, but just to put on the table that in thinking about deeper cuts, wanting that to be a consideration of for next year, as well as just thinking about what a phasing could look like, if there would be helpful aspects of that.
The two things I know, I understand about that. One is the process that Bethel went through.
Yeah.
And they made a decision about mid-March, not for the next school year, but for the year after that. And the amount of unrest or concern that school went through for a 16-month period of time was super challenging. The other thing about that is, the other consideration is that by not identifying like which building that would be, we're just having a similar scenario to what we have had in terms of rumors about schools for a while, and those two things are concerning to me. Again, I'm taking the guidance from you all, but those are two things that I think are important considerations. And I understand the pace of this, and the pace of it is really meant to get the information to staff as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I even, there were staff who spoke to, can you just tell us now? And that was a month ago because they just wanted to know. And so there are those pieces in terms of trying to come in holding people, and also coming in and having a decision so people can understand it. Yeah. Those are, again, I can see both.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. And I think in thinking about cuts, even if we had a phasing, that my thoughts would be being able to name and know exactly. And I'm thinking about students at different schools who may have an extra step, an extra school switch, whether it's to a different middle school than they expected, or in the middle of their middle school year switching, or if there was an elementary school consolidation, thinking about those students and if they were feeding into Linus Pauling already, are they switching to another school and then going there versus those who may switch from 5th grade to a different elementary school, 6th grade, and then into a 7th and 8th. So just trying to think about how do we prepare families and students and minimize the number of transitions students would have to go through. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Before you go, Sammy, I just wanted to, there was something you said earlier, Ryan, about staffing. And I think that we're asking for two different things from Ryan right now. We're asking for him to bring us a plan that is going deeper, and we're asking him to retain retain staff. You can't do that necessarily, right? I mean, obviously it's just impossible to do both. And I wanted to just name that because I don't think it's fair to pretend like that's not true. And I don't like that either. I just wanted to also say that. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted to bring us back into the reality of what those numbers are too. And I also know that there's a lot of staff that seem like that are highly invisibilized when there are losses to staffing in buildings, that people may not have as close of relationships to, like kitchen staff or custodial and things, and people like that are also necessary staff in buildings. And so I don't want us to just think of only teachers in these conversations too, because it goes across all different levels. And I know that in the admin building, there's staff besides folk that people already know who are in here that we've lost over the years too, that we don't see anymore. That maybe the school board might know because we see them and interact with them, but they're gone. And so I think that every time that we're losing staff, it's hitting all levels, not just one area. And I wanted to make sure that was also said. I'm just trying to make sure things are said here in our conversation. Sammy?
Thank you. I'm going to preface where my mindset right now is a little bit of, I want to acknowledge what you just shared, and also share the cautiousness that my colleague Chris Hawkins have shared as well. I want us to commit. I believe we are at the V1 level where if we want to add bills and widgets, we need to commit. Either we're taking off or we're going around the runway. So I will ask a few questions. The first one is a little bit opinionated. Ryan, how early in the year would you recommend we engage in a boundary review study and a boundary review process? If we would do that, how early in an academic year for the next year to be in effect?
About this time would be when you would need to start that.
About this time.
Which was a challenge.
Microphone.
I'm sorry. I'm kind of tired of this thing in front of me. I would say. No, I can still lean back.
Yeah, you can lean back.
All right. I've just been sitting here for a while. I think we would need to be up to that right now.
Yeah. So I'm going to opine a little bit. I was in that process in 2019. I interviewed folks who were in the midst of it in the 2000s, where I believe Jefferson boundary, I believe that was in discussion at the time. It was brutal, it was challenging, and there was a cost. So that's my opining there. That in mind, I have a question for any additional consolidation or cuts through consolidation we want to propose that appear to be rationally, you gotta go elementary, you can't go high school, you can't go another middle, you gotta go additional elementary, 2 elementaries, you're gonna impact the capacity, 1 elementary, sounds to be the only rational possible path. But I want to ask, what is the marginal cost, additional costs that we need to add for us, not cost money only, time, capacity, labor, emotional labor, all of the things that my colleagues mentioned, which is a cost you cannot capture with money. The conversations that we need to get to build the trust that this is the best boundary review plan that we need to commit with all the disruption that we're adding right now. I believe we're at the V1 speed level, and if you want to engage in boundary, you need to really plan ahead and make it right. And these 2 layers over each other makes me question. So my question is, what kind of additional bandwidth, additional costs we need to engage in to fully implement an additional elementary school closure that may entail as well boundary review? And it's an open question. You can answer it now, or you can say, maybe we need to come back to the drawing board.
I think that you would need to look at that without, like I said before, honestly, you would look at decisions that had the fewest schools impacted. So you'd be looking at potentially looking at the boundary of 1 building and where those students would attend rather than looking at all the boundaries across the board. I think that's kind of how you would have to look at it at this point in time.
Yeah, thank you. Does it make any sense to do a gradual closure since we're going to see that this is going to be critical in 3 years? You start with the K1, then 2, and then 3, then 5, and eventually you close the school. Is that a model that you have seen successful?
The problem that I see in that is similar to what we've been dealing with, which is fewer classrooms in a school. And as that happens, resources get thinner, and that has an impact, and the savings doesn't come as quickly, so you're not able to build up the programming that you have in schools that have a higher density rate.
Okay. My curiosity.
I want to add another piece to what Ryan just said too, with goes with what some of you have said. In our departments too, we think about mental health and well-being for students and staff and families, and thinking about the anticipation of grief and grief are 2 different things. And so you basically could set up the anticipation of grief, which has the same impacts as grief, and then when something happens, then the grief cycle as well. And that's a lot. Right now, we're kind of the anticipation of grief, and then once decisions are made, then there'll be another grief cycle too. So that's the thing to think about.
I want to add one thing also. I've been through this before, and what I would tell you also is that when you close a school, it doesn't only impact that school's staff. When we apply the contract and the bargaining agreement, it impacts teachers across the district when we're looking at their seniority and their certifications. And so we will be looking at moving staff across the district, and if you draw that out, it's going to happen more than 1 year.
For those reasons, I feel I have 3 questions that will help me evaluate between committing to the proposal that we have vetted with the community. It appears to me it will work. It appears to me it will work for short and medium term. Long term, we don't have enough data, but it looks like long term we will need to have another decision. But we invested really great resources to know how we can make it work. The only reason I would say let's have a pause, let's slow down, go around the runway, and have another plan that we can fly with is 3 questions. Honestly, I'm not sure I have clear answer that it is worth it to go back to the community and say, let's do it. But I hope you can enlighten me if my understanding is different. The marginal gains, and marginal gains like the additional benefit we get for an additional elementary school closure on the school board goals and programming, is it significant enough to justify, let's do it right away? What are those marginal gains on staffing, FTE? How many savings on FTE, if any, we are going to get for closing one elementary school? How many benefits we're going to get for retaining programming for closing one elementary school? And also, is this sheet going to change significantly enough to say it is worth it to close an additional elementary school, or are the numbers are going to be almost the same on the capacity summary page? So these are the 3 things I'm really curious about. As it stands now, I don't see the marginal gains are significant enough, but please, I want you to feel also comfortable to say, no, we believe the marginal gains on school board goals and programming, saving FTE, an impact on community, and the capacity is really worth it to actually navigate that and put another school name on the table.
I'm gonna put that question right back to you.
I was just going to say, I don't think that's a fair question to ask the staff. It doesn't feel like it to me because it's a lot of information you're asking at one time. And
yeah,
unless they have that information readily available, and I don't know if that's a fair question for them, honestly.
So maybe it's a rhetorical question. If we don't have that information and we're at the V1, honestly, I'm ready to commit without exacerbating the anticipation of grief and say, let's go with this plan for this year, for the foreseeable future. Give the assurance for the community. We're going to get this right as best as possible. Let's not have the perfect be enemy of the good. Or the other way around. You know what I mean?
So
but we're not voting on a proposal.
Right.
We don't even have a first read of a proposal. I think what we need to do is like ask Ryan. We have to come with some kind of way to ask Ryan to bring us back something deeper, or just bring us back a refined, or he needs some kind of direction, because he's not the one who's actually deciding. We're deciding, and we need something in front of us to decide on. And so if it's already original proposal of one that we asked him to bring, or if we're asking him to bring a modified proposal, I think is what he needs to know tonight. So we have something to look at. And so I think we need to start moving in that direction with this conversation, because it's getting to that point. But does that make sense? I don't know if they can answer that without data in front of them right now, unless they know the data off their top of their heads.
So again, this is your decision to make, and so I understand where you're wanting me to be definitive, and that's what I can tell you is that it helps with capacity, because you have schools that have more students in each one of them because there are fewer of them that are running.
Mm-hmm.
What are your other 2 questions?
FTE, are we gonna save more FTEs from being cut?
You will have fewer FTE because you will close 2 schools. So that means that you have fewer people. You'll have fewer principals. You'll have fewer office staff. You'll have fewer of all positions.
Mm-hmm.
Less so with teachers, because you'll still have the same number of students, and we have a ratio for class size. And then in terms of the third question you asked, it would allow you, it would allow the district more flexibility in programming, because you would have made the cuts that you need to make for the most part by consolidation, rather than just through the staffing process and the budgeting in the spring.
And roughly, we're talking $1 million flexibility of programming.
We know that we save about $2 million when we close a middle school, and about $1 million when we close an elementary, and our gap is about $4 million. So it gets us much closer at an early period of the school year, with a lot of changes to come.
Thank you.
Teresa, I seen your hand up.
Yeah, I think you kind of, Lou, summarized what I was really leaning toward, which is that the discussion right now isn't to decide if we want this proposal. It's to decide if we think we have enough information from you to make a decision, and I don't think we do. I think we need to see an alternative plan that would let us compare the pros and cons of all those gains or costs that we've been talking about. What do we get if we close an elementary school in terms of closing more of that gap? What do we give up if we close an elementary school, even if it closes more of the gap? And I just don't see how we can do that if we're comparing this to an imaginary proposal that doesn't have any numbers on it. And I know you have that information. And so, and I appreciate you guys have done so much work already, and it's hard because it's all distilled down to these little pieces, like, snippets that go out, so that doesn't communicate maybe the hundreds of hours that have gone into thinking about what are we going to do. And I know you've done that, and it is a big ask to come back and say, can you go and refine a little more information for us and tell us about an alternative scenario? But the one thing that's clear is that $4 million is more than $2 million, and $3 million is more than $2 million. And we have a bigger number than what this proposal can close. And I think it would be irresponsible of us not to at least ask you to show us what would happen if we tried to close a little bit more right now, in a way that it seems inevitable that we are going to have to do it anyway. And I don't think we have 3 years. I really don't. I think maybe we have 2 years before we will be back at the table to do it. But we certainly don't have 5 years. And it's going to take that long for the changes from this consolidation to work their way through. And then we would just be doing it again. And so I would like to see another proposal. And I think the community would appreciate if we saw another point of comparison before we tried to make a decision that we will have to live with for a very long time.
I need to do like a clarification that if we're asking Ryan to refine a proposal, that doesn't mean we're choosing between proposals on a first read. We're going to have a first read of something else. It wouldn't be a comparison. So just so it's really clear, because we're asking to do a first read, then vote. And so we would have a first read on something else, not the proposal. That's not the original proposal, correct?
Thank you for clarifying that. Yes.
So that's where I want to make sure that that's really clear for the community too. So it's not like you're going to bring us both of them. If we ask you to bring us something else, you're going to bring us something for a first read, right? That's the process that we had already outlined.
Yes.
And I just want to make sure that that's very clear for everybody, because I think sometimes we know what we're talking about, and then communities listening, and they're like, "Wait, you said you were going to bring two to compare," and that's not what that's not what we would be asking Ryan. We'd be asking him to bring something else.
And I want to just take a moment and give a nod to Lou, because something that you do really well as chair is you make sure that the language at the table translates to the folks that are not sitting back here. And I really appreciate that, because we are not, the way that we are, we summarize things sometimes misses key pieces, and it's misrepresents. So I'm not saying we want to compare them to choose between them. I'm saying I would like a first read of something else entirely, and then we'll have discussion about it, because that's the process. So thank you very much for being attentive to that.
I appreciate that clarification as well.
Did you have something, Shauna?
Yeah, so just more clarification in terms of process. So if we're asking for that moving forward, which would, another proposal, you've said, and I think what's come out is thinking about deeper cuts, the potential of an elementary school. So just in terms of process, would that mean naming an elementary school and actually having conversations that potentially disrupt even in that potential or possibility a school community, just so we understand the impact?
I think that's important to do. It's hard to do. I'm not looking forward to doing that. but I think it's important to do because that's the way we've moved forward with this thus far, where we've had the opportunity to go I've been able to go talk to a staff before they heard it during a meeting. I think that's important because we also established a care room for staff after having that conversation. We had lunch so they could ask questions. I think that those things are still important with whatever proposal you're asking me to bring forward. And so to me, I think that those are important lessons learned that I'd want to be able to maintain.
Thanks, Ryan. I think I just wanted to confirm on our end so that we know the impact, and even if an updated or a new proposal came forward that did not move forward, just the impact even in the interim for families, for staff, for students as well. So, and thank you for taking that time and that care and really being there personally as well, and making space for staff.
I think it's important that with that, we're also trying to maintain our timelines. So this will be something of a quick turnaround, but I think that's where we're at.
Is there any other board comments on this? Go ahead, Chris.
I just want to remind the community and people that this is really, really, really difficult. And we are all feeling it deep in our hearts. And I know Ryan and your whole team, it's the same. This is not what you want to be doing. And I know it's really difficult because these are people that you work side by side with, and it's going to affect their lives. And for all of us, as we mentioned, grieving and the anticipation of grieving is really difficult. And it's really hard when we're doing this, you know, and we as board members are called evil people and other names. That I just want the community to know that this is not easy for us, and that we have worked really hard and diligently to figure out what's best and to do this the best way we can, knowing that it's really difficult and we don't want to be here and we don't want to be making these decisions, but we are. And so I appreciate that you're thinking about the personal part of all of this and how difficult it is.
This is the most difficult work I've done in my 27-year career.
Yeah.
I just wanted to piggyback off what Chris said, that like board members are also personally impacted by the decision we're making, and I think sometimes people forget that too. And so, yeah. You had your hand up, Sammy?
Yeah, really want to appreciate the conversation, and thank you, Chair. Again, I want to echo what Therese said, is that you really centered the conversation around a common language. I will support the will of the board. I want to share my reservation about bringing another proposal, unless we're willing to commit to a proposal, to whatever on the table, as long as it works. If I would recommend right now, I believe I have sufficient information for our first reading. If we would have a school name proposed and marginal benefits, that cost has already been expensed by those conversations. That conversation, the teachers, classified staff, and the students are going to have with elementary school is a cost we already have committed to. That's a decision we're making right now. I will support that because there are some marginal benefits that might be making it worth it if we commit to that. But because of that cost and because of my inclination, and I heard Ryan really clearly say, like, we have lessons learned where people really wish they have done everything together, like Bethel, they wish that they have done it all together at the same time. I'm of the mindset of we not really anticipate many things in the future. In 2018, we had a forecast of how the school districts will look like. We had a pandemic. It changed the whole bowl game. And I cannot predict what will happen in 3 years now. Because of those reasons, because we have done really good work, my personal individual recommendation is I do have enough to commit with all the costs that we have incurred for what we can do. But if the will of the majority of the board is to explore more, I will support that for the reasons of there are some benefits, and we already have incurred very important grieving costs that you cannot recover from. Even if we pull back, they're going to think about it, they're going to anticipate it for the next 3 years. And that neighborhood school, the community members in that neighborhood are going to anticipate that. So that's where I want to say, I know first read and then second read and then it's formal decision. Personally, I believe that I need to commit to a plan, and at this stage with the information available, and I feel this is enough information for me to commit with, but I'll support where the board will go.
We don't need to make a motion though or anything, right? Does anybody want to, I mean, do you have enough information?
I have direction.
Do you have direction? Did enough people weigh in on this conversation of what you're asking, of what we're asking?
Or I guess maybe a question is, has anybody not shared something they feel like is important for Ryan to think about before we move on?
I would say, Ryan, that the only thing that hasn't come up, I don't think, is having information about possibilities. If you're bringing us a proposal, which it sounds like you are, with that goes a little bit further of like what are some of the benefits with that. Like you talked about them a little bit, but I think it would be helpful in bringing something forward to us that's included.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay. And I just want, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I had a little question that's come up because of some of the comments that I've heard at listening sessions, as well as seen in some of the reports around, even things like going back to the K-8 model of where another K-8 model would live. And so just a question, I don't know if this is an easy question to answer, it doesn't have to be in this moment, but thinking about which buildings have the capacity to be K-8 buildings. So a question that came up that I see on the stoplight report is, well, could Sheldon be the building that houses a K-8 versus Mountain View? And I see that it's yellow in here in terms of there would be some significant costs with that. But it was just a question that came up along with thinking about some of the benefits of different models, wondering if that's a relatively easy question to ask and answer in terms of which buildings could be converted with maybe minimal modifications to K-8s versus those that can't. Because there were also other asks from the community around, what about Lincoln, or what about this school or that?
I think it's more about capacity and programming to the fit of a K-8. And so in our bond program, we added the art science rooms in every elementary school. So those are the things that make the school more feasible as a K-8.
The things about Mountain View as a specific it has capacity for 200 more students than it currently has, so it's a significant amount of space available, and so that's one of the considerations of that. Also thinking about Sheldon and 5-year-olds coming into that space, it's pretty expansive, and so some of those considerations as well. So that while there's potential that some others could become K-8, I'd also be cautious about how many K-8s we create, because then again we start to lose our density and ability to provide programming.
And I was thinking less about more K-8s versus where is the best fit.
Yeah, and I was kind of including Bernie's question in there too.
Before we move on to the next thing, I just wanted to say, Ryan, I know that this is not easy, and we asked you to do one thing, and now we're asking you to do something else, and I wanted to recognize that that's a lot of work on you that we're asking and supporting the staff with this ask, and just wanted to say thank you for going that direction, and I know it's not easy, and for all of you up here either.
Yeah, my team's been working really hard to answer all the questions that are coming in. Those FAQs are taking almost a full day for staff to complete because of the information that we need to put into them. So I just appreciate the folks that I work with, and that does make it this task easier.
Yeah, y'all are working overtime on it. I understand that. But thank you for bringing something to us at the next meeting to look at. Next item, oh wait, there was one more thing too about that. It's not that we didn't like the original proposal per se, but I just want to make sure that was clear, because sometimes people, when we're asking you to do something different, it looks like, oh, we just totally didn't like your ideas. And I think we heard a lot of things from the community as well around that. So the next item on the agenda is consolidated action. As a reminder, under this portion of the agenda are for action. Does anyone have a question about anything in consolidated action?
Hi, Laura. There we go.
Have a good night, y'all. You have a question, Sammy?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. Personnel.
Okay. Go ahead.
May I ask the person who proposed the personnel action to the podium for a question? So, Chair, I ask for your permission. I know it's our tradition not to ask specific questions about retirements or hiring decisions. However, I would like to ask for an exemption to recognize our HR director and probably the longest serving person in this room in Corvallis School District. Do I have permission?
Sure.
Jennifer, thank you so much for your service. I see you have proposed in the action a retirement of an individual. Could you tell us a little bit about this person? Not a third person, that would be awkward. Reflecting on your service, I would like just to hear maybe a minute. How did your service with Corvallis School District go?
Okay, well, I wasn't expecting this. I was hoping it would just fly by under the radar.
Nope.
So, I have had the fortune to work in this district for over 23 years. And have appreciated the staff that I have worked with throughout that. There's been ups and downs with the budget and all of the different things that we've had to work through. But this staff is extremely dedicated and is just a great group to work with. And I've worked with great administrators, and I've appreciated my opportunity to be here.
Jennifer, thank you. Chair, I want to take points of personal privilege to acknowledge over the 10 years I have been on budget committee or the school board, I have observed Jennifer's leadership and really grace and ability to share and work with folks in a very significant way, whether observing the administrative team during negotiations or through all the challenges that the school district navigated over the years. For that, I just want to say thank you, Jennifer, for your service over the years, and congratulations on very well-earned retirement.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay.
Jennifer loves to be recognized. Not so much.
Okay. Did anybody else have anything on that item? Is there anybody, would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. Chair, I move that the consolidated action be adopted as proposed.
Second.
It's been moved by Judah and seconded by Sammy. Any further discussion? Okay, has been moved by Judah and seconded by Sammy to adopt the consolidated action items as submitted. Sammy?
Aye.
Judah?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Shauna?
Aye.
Therese?
Aye.
Bernie?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion passes. The next item on the agenda is consolidated information. As a reminder, the items under this portion of the agenda are for discussion. Would anyone like to discuss an item in consolidated information? Okay. The next item on the agenda is board member comments. Is there any board member comments? I do have one board member comment or two, just so you all know. They're very short, though. I think we need to do a review of our proclamations, and I would like to figure out like how we want to do that. Is that something we can look into? Maybe the board leadership can chat and come up with something. Is that okay with you all? Because I think some things have changed in them. Either at the state or national level, perhaps that we may need to update on some of our stuff. So just having a review of the proclamations we read. Okay. And then the next one is about the, I think it was 2021 the last time we took a look at the resolution on immigration. Was it 2021 or was it sooner?
It was after COVID, but it wasn't that long after COVID, so that sounds right.
2021 sounds
Yeah.
right. Is that something that the board would like us to bring back to take a look at, to reaffirm? Did you get that? Okay, thank you. All right, those were my only two comments, and then my last one is just thank you to the folk who stayed around to listen to the conversation, as well as those listening online, and again to Ryan and your team for answering all these questions for us all to have. And I do want to say thank you to Bridges for our little spooky edition little zine we have here to look at. So I want to say thanks to the Bridges students as well.
It says on the back, look forward to the November issues, and I am looking forward to them, and now it's an expectation.
So we'll see that in November, I see. And our meeting is adjourned at 9:29.